Hi everyone, Belinda here from Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, True Aussie Murders Caffeinated. I'm on a little break at the moment, but I thought while I was gone, we could do a little trip down memory lane with some of my more popular episodes. So please join me as we dive on in. And don't fret, guys, I'm not gone for long. I will be back in early July 2025 with new episodes for you, but until then, stay caffeinated. Hi everyone, and welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, True Aussie Murders Caffeinated, and I'm your host Belinda Brady. And welcome guys, welcome to episode 16 titled The Mack Truck Murderer. Now, up episode 16, we're nearly in the 20s guys, can you believe it? So as I said, this episode is titled The Mack Truck Murderer. And straight up, I'll give you my sources before we get down to the nitty gritty of the episode. Now, my sources for this episode are murderpedia.org, justice.nt.gov.au, wikipedia.org, www.ntnews.com.au, www.abc.net.au, www.news.com.au. Now, what am I drinking today? So it's a bit cold today and I need, even though we are still in summer, and I need a bit of a caffeinated kick up the backside. So I'm sticking with my tried and true black coffee with toasted almond syrup, and it's actually going down really well. So hopefully whatever you've got is helping you through whatever slump you're going through. I'm recording this on a rather dull Monday afternoon, so I need all the help I can get. And really, where else would you rather be than talking about crime with you fine people? And that's exactly what I'm doing. And that is the pick up my heart and hopefully your heart needs. So, get yourself settled, guys. This is the tale of the Mack Truck Murderer. And it's actually funny, some of these crimes I've never heard of until I start researching what I'm going to talk about next. And I'd never heard of this one. So it's new to me as much as it is to you guys. So we're learning about this together. So whatever you're up to, get yourself comfy, get your favorite drink, get your favorite beverage, get yourself comfy, lend me your ears, and let's get stuck right into the podcast. Now, this podcast does talk about murder. If that is upsetting to you, you do not need to listen. This is not the podcast for you, and I am not your girl. But if it is your thing, and I would say for most of us, it is because we are listening to it, and I'm talking about it. Settle in, get down, get comfy, and let's get start right into it. So episode 16, The Mack Truck Murderer. Now, I'm going to assume most of us like going for a drink with our friends or loved ones at our local bar or pub, right? Like whether it's letting off some steam after a long working week or a night out with friends, with your girlfriends or your significant other for a date night, it's something most of us enjoy. And it is a big part of our social life and how we let off steam. Yes, some of us do take it a little too far, and some of us do get asked to leave wherever we're drinking at for, because we're a bit too, we're too intoxicated. But, I'm not passing judgment. It's happened to the best of us. But what happens if a drunk patron gets asked to leave but doesn't exactly take it the best way? What happens if he is that drunk, that angry, he's not thinking straight and instantly wants revenge? And what if that revenge is murder? And not just murder, but mass murder. Sadly and shockingly, this is exactly what happened in a motel bar near Uluru, which is also known as Ayers Rock, in the Australian state of the Northern Territory in 1983, when 36-year-old Douglas Crabb drove his Mack truck through the Inland Hotel after being kicked out for being too drunk, killing 5 people, some of whom were crushed under his 25-ton semi-trailer. Now, Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock in Northern Territory, is a hot, dry, isolated place, but it is an absolutely beautiful place. And due to the stunning beauty of the Australian outback and like I said, the sheer size of the rock, it's also a really popular place with tourists, with folks coming from all over the world to see this natural wonder. And when we're on holiday or vacation, as some of you guys like to call it, most of us like to wet our whistle at the local watering hole. And, that could be the pub or the bar. We tend to call them pubs here in Australia. And I know other places in the world call them bars. But, some people, especially in an isolated place like Uluru, there are hotel bars attached to the hotel where you're staying for the night or a few nights. That's not unusual. It's all over the world. And some people like to have drinks at those motel bars and mingle with the locals and the passers through. And at the time that this incident occurred in 1983, a lot of construction workers were staying at the hotel and had knocked off from work. There's also a lot of, night shift workers. So they had knocked off from work in the early hours of the morning. So they were enjoying a beer or, a bourbon before hitting the sack. Now, there was never a shortage of people in the bar, and on August 18th, 1983, there was no exception. The place was packed, and patrons from all walks of life were enjoying themselves until approximately 1:30 a.m. when a scream pierced the bar, and a split second later, so a screams pierced the bar noise, like all the chatter in the bar. A deafening scream has just sliced through that noise, and a split second later, a truck was running head-on into the bar. And when it did, the driver geared down, revved the engine again, and moved the huge truck forward even further. When the smoke cleared, when the dust settled, the scene was nothing short of absolute carnage, and 4 innocent people were dead, with many pinned under the truck's massive wheels. Now, a 5th person died later in hospital after surgeons spent a grueling 5.5 hours trying to save her life. Behind the wheel of the truck was 36-year-old Douglas Crabb, a man who had been drinking at the bar up until an hour or so beforehand and was kicked out for being too drunk. Now, Douglas worked as a truck driver, and he'd been one his whole life and had begun driving trucks at the young age of 14. Now, I couldn't seem to find a great deal of info on Douglas, such as, his family or his parents or his early life. But I could find that he does have a son and a daughter, but I couldn't find anything other than that, ex-partners or marriages, etc., etc. And I took a really deep dive into him and I really couldn't find anything. I did find, though, however, in February of 1983, so only a few months before this occurred, Douglas was arrested and charged with assault when he got into a fight with a carload of teens at a service station near Tennant Creek, which is another suburb in the Northern Territory. Now, apparently these teens were harassing a service station, and service station is what we call petrol station or servo. Other countries, places call them gas stations. So apparently the teens were harassing the service station attendant, and then they started on Douglas, who then retaliated by jumping up and down on the bonnet of one of the cars of the teens. In March of that same year, Douglas attended a country and western function in Curtin Springs, also in the Northern Territory, and got involved in 2 separate fights, both of which needed police intervention. Now, Douglas made weekly deliveries and was well known to the staff at the bar and the hotel, and he knew the layout of it well. He also loved a beer, and he loved having a beer at the small brick building that housed the bar. On the night of 18th of August 1983, Douglas rolled up to the motel in his 25-ton semi-trailer and went to the bar for a drink. Bar regular and local worker Bernadette Schiller, who was 20 at the time, was also in the bar. Now, Bernadette had knocked off work and was keen to catch up with some friends who were leaving the next day and have a drink before she headed off to bed. And she had just finished her first drink when she came across Douglas, or Krabby, as she knew him by. Now, Bernadette admitted that she was a little afraid of Douglas, as he was known to have a filthy temper and could change in an instant. Bernadette knew him as he used to make weekly deliveries to the Uluru Motel, which is its actual name, where she worked. And she also had the unpleasant task of throwing him out of the pub just the week before due to his bad behaviour. Now, Bernadette states that on this night she was standing at the bar the night of Douglas driving the truck through the bar. She states she was standing at the bar when Douglas grabbed her on the butt. Bernadette told him to fuck off, and she remembers this because it was the first person she'd ever told to fuck off. So she also said he was being lewd and vile. Now, Bernadette watched as Douglas then walked behind the bar and tried to help himself to a drink, and that's when bar staff intervened and tried to kick him out. Now, Douglas took a swing at one and a scuffle followed. He was then finally asked to leave. Bernadette said it was around 1:30 a.m., so not long after Douglas had been kicked out, and she was standing at the jukebox waiting to pick a song when she heard someone yell out, and she glanced in the direction of where the scream was coming from, and she was expecting to see, someone weeing on a tree or, something else happening. But what she saw instead was a huge Mack truck coming straight for them. Within seconds, she heard what she thought was a bomb going off, followed by the sounds of screams and things falling everywhere. She watched in horror and slow motion as the bull bar of the huge truck was coming straight for her. That bull bar hit her on her right side, and she somehow managed to curl herself up into the fetal position to get away from the wheels. Now, at some point, Bernadette recalls in her fog she heard someone yelling that the truck might explode, and she managed to get up and run and proceeded to throw up once she managed to get outside. While all this was happening, the driver of the truck got out of his truck, smiled down at one of his victims, and ran. The driver was Douglas Crabb. Now, when he was kicked out of the bar only an hour or so earlier, he went back to his Mack truck and drove it to a nearby motel, where he unhitched one of the two attached trailers. He then got back in his truck and drove to the inland hotel bar and manoeuvred at speed around a blind bend, around a minibus, and straight through a car park and straight into the brick wall of the pub, crushing whoever was in his path. When he was done, he had killed 4 people, while one would die of their injuries later in hospital, bringing the tally to 5, and he injured many, many more and left the bar in absolute ruins. The truck had penetrated the building to the length of one trailer. That's how far in it had gone. And it remained in place after impact, and the only thing holding up the roof was that truck. The building looked like a bomb had ripped through it. Bodies were all over the place. Blood was everywhere. Bodies of the dead and injured and people's items such as shoes and clothes were embedded in the ground under the truck and its blood-stained bull bar. Many of the dead were pulled from under that bull bar. And as I said before, Douglas got out of his still-running truck, looked down at a victim, smiled, and then he ran. Meanwhile, with medical assistance hours away due to the remote location, survivors helped out the best they could. Bernadette remembers trying to help a guy who was sitting there holding his wife's hand, and she had met this couple earlier that night, and he was bleeding really, really badly. She used a sanitary pad to try and help stop the bleeding, and she asked if she could help his wife, to which he replied simply, "She's dead." The victims of that awful night were David Seng, who was 24, Adrian Dernan, 21, Helen Fuller, 22, Patricia Slynn, 45, and Leslie Mackey Ramsey, 35. All these innocent people who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time died as a result of their horrific injuries, with Leslie dying later in surgery in Alice Springs Hospital. Many more were injured, including Bernadette, who suffered broken ribs, was bruised black and blue from shoulder to ankle, and she was peeing blood for 6 months after the event. 6 months of peeing blood. Can you imagine? And the post-traumatic stress she developed from that night still lives with her now. Douglas was arrested the next morning after being found at the Illawarra Tourist Village construction site after a police search in which First Nations trackers assisted the police with looking for him. The catering manager of the site, William Hugh O'Neill, found Douglas walking towards him and waited with him while they waited for the police to arrive. Douglas asked the extent of the damage, and William told him at least 4 people were dead, including, quote, one of my boys from the kitchen. Police arrived and quickly arrested Douglas and charged him with 5 counts of murder. A hearing was set for October 1983 and footage from the scene was shown, and it showed the bodies of the 4 victims who were killed instantly, 2 men and 2 women, in the makeshift mortuary set up in the back of the motel. It showed the absolute destruction Douglas caused, and he watched this video expressionless. The trial was set for March 1984, and witnesses testified that Douglas had been rude and aggressive in the bar. They also reported seeing him held down by 3 men when he was kicked out, and they also testified that the same man made a very quick exit via the gaping hole his truck had left in the building. Douglas Crabb offered no reason for his actions, none whatsoever. He pleaded memory loss from the moment he removed the second trailer from his truck to the minute he woke up from the truck's exhaust and the damaged room after. So he claimed he had no memory of when he unhitched his second trailer to when he woke up in a completely trashed bar with bodies underneath his truck, but the jury wasn't buying any of it. He was found guilty of all 5 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment on each count, with each term to run consecutively. Asked if he had anything to say, he replied, "No, nothing." Douglas later appealed his sentence to the Federal Court of Australia, which found the judge at his original trial had erred his summing to the jury, and the convictions were set aside and a retrial was ordered for Douglas, but the appeal was dismissed in the High Court of Australia. So he had a second trial set for 1985 in Darwin's Supreme Court, and again he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 5 consecutive terms of life imprisonment, and he was sent back to Alice Springs Correctional Centre. In 2004, Northern Territory's mandatory life means life legislation was appealed, and an automatic 25-year parole period was fixed under new laws, which meant Douglas could be eligible for parole, which was met with an absolute uproar, as you would imagine, none more so than from survivor Bernadette, who I spoke about earlier in the episode, who was there that awful night and was the girl who told Douglas to fuck off when he grabbed her on the behind. Now, to this day, Bernadette still suffers flashbacks, sleepless nights, and post-traumatic stress from that night, and she was also joined in voicing her disapproval by another survivor by the name of Lydia Hanna, and they both petitioned to keep Douglas behind bars. Bernadette said Douglas had not once shown any remorse for any of those people he killed, and he deserved his life sentence. Now, Douglas's son Anthony, however, had a different point of view to Bernadette and Lydia, with him saying at the time, quote, "I hope he gets out Everyone deserves a second chance. He's done his time and he will regret what he did for the rest of his life. But Anthony then lashed out at Lydia Hanna in a Facebook post not long after, saying, quote, "The bitch is at it again, front page of NT News. This woman is still going on about losing her friends at Inland Motel in 1983. Why were you drinking at that time of night? Get on with your life, lady. We are sick of your shit." End quote. He then doubled down on that post when contacted by the press, saying, quote, "There is one woman, I'm not going to run her down. She has genuine grief for what happened. Get over it. It was 33 years ago." Now, most people, especially one who had survived something as horrific as an angry man driving their Mack truck through a pub, might not forgive that outburst. But Lydia did. And Lydia actually said at the time, quote, "I feel for the family because he's never had a father since he was a kid. I understand that angst because they really want him out so he can see his grandkids. It's not their fault, but they shouldn't be blaming me like I'm the bad guy." End quote. Now, Douglas was eventually moved to a jail in Perth in Western Australia so he can be closer to his family, including his grandchildren. And at the time of this podcast, he is still in prison. He's still serving his 5 consecutive life sentences. And he's never offered, from what I could find, he's never offered a reason why he drove his Mack truck into the bar that night. He's never said why he did it. The crime has inspired pop culture, especially in the music world, with an Australian band by the name of Hunters and Collectors. If you haven't heard from them, check them out. They're awesome. Aussie band by the name of Hunters and Collectors using a memorial plaque at the bar where the massacre took place as part of the cover for their 1984 album titled Jaws of Life. And the opening track for that album, which is titled 42 Wheels, is written and sung from Douglas's point of view. So there we have it, guys. The story of a man who was kicked out of a pub for bad behaviour and being too drunk. And instead of just sleeping it off, he decided to drive his Mack truck through the bar and kill 5 people. 5 innocent people who were doing nothing more than enjoying their holiday or letting off some steam or catching up with friends. And not only did he kill those 5 people, he injured and traumatized so many more. And his actions that day, that night, have not gone away, and they will not go away. Trauma from that never leaves you and will never leave the victims. It's just really, really sad story all around. And so that's it, guys. Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, True Aussie Murders Caffeinated. Another episode done and dusted, episode 16. Thank you for listening, guys. And if you are enjoying my podcast, please get the word out there. I'd love if you could get the word out there. Share me, talk about me, bore your friends with me. You know you want to. And I'm on TikTok. If you can find me, I'm Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans on TikTok. You can subscribe for a shout out. I would love to shout out to some people who listen. So please, if you would like a shout out, please let me know and please tell me where you're from. And you can subscribe. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. If you're more of a YouTube listener, you can follow me on Spotify. You can follow me on Apple Podcasts. You can follow me wherever you can find me. And you can also make comments on Spotify and send fan mail if that is your thing. I would absolutely love to hear from you. And if you have any Australian murders, Australian crimes you would like me to cover, please let me know. I am all ears. And as always, guys, thank you for listening. I so appreciate every single one of you. And until next time, guys, stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. I will catch you all later.